Hi everybody, my name's Christina Longden and I'm the writer in residence for Kirklees, and today I'm going to tell you a little bit about Fairtrade. And this is going to be a story about power, about money, and also about justice. And I'll let you decide at the end whether you think the real heroes of the story never have their voices heard, or whether they actually receive their rewards. Does justice overcome greed and corruption and selfishness? Let's find out. It's not fair. I'm sure many of you have said this. I've said this as a child, and I still say it as an adult. And often parents say life isn't fair. So let's find out how we can tell them they're wrong, and let's find out how we can make life a little bit fairer. Now, before we start properly, I'm going to tell you a story about a magic fridge. I'm very lucky because there is a magic fridge in my house, and it has been there for many years. Here is a magic fridge. And the reason it's magic is because every now and then the children and the husband will open it and say, the magic fridge has worked. And that means that chocolate has mysteriously and suddenly appeared in the fridge. It has been known that sometimes someone will say, Mom, the magic fridge is broken. And then, depending on what mood I'm in, I'll either say, oh dear, I'm sure it will right itself, my darlings. And other times I will get really cross and say, do you think the food cupboards just stock themselves and the things magically fly into them? And I'm sure some of you have heard your own parents say the same things. But joking to one side, let's look at the magic fridge and the magic cupboards in our lives. Where do these things come from? Because everything that we consume, everything that we eat and drink and play with comes from somewhere. It's not often that all of it comes from a place in our own country. So let's have a little look at where these things come from. The supermarkets are so heaving with products, it's sometimes difficult to decide what it is you want to buy. So let's find out exactly where some of these items that we're very familiar with actually do come from. First of all, you need to understand that we have a great number of people in the world who are called smallholder farmers. You'll probably get very familiar with the term farmer, but a smallholder farmer is somebody that holds a small piece of land. They might have bought it, they might rent it, their parents might have given it them, and also producers. That's another word that we often use for smallholder farmers, or for people that might produce a craft item or a body lotion or just something else that isn't food or drink that we eat. We still consume it. And these smallholder farmers and the producers, they work within something called a supply chain. All very abstract language, but in a minute you'll find out exactly what the supply chain is and why it's so important. There's a picture there, just I'm hiding him, but that's the smallholder farmer who's a coffee farmer. We'll talk a little bit more about what they do in a minute. So first of all, where does produce come from and where is it grown, the stuff that we eat and drink? There are actually 33 million smallholder farmers, and believe it or not, they are the poorest people in the world. They're farmers and they have very little land and they have very little chances. I'll tell you a little bit more why in a minute. But they, the poorest people in the world, actually supply 70% of all the things that we consume and we eat and we drink and we play with and we wear. Here's a picture of the world, and I put this on along with this other one here just to show you the equator, the line, the imaginary line that runs right through the middle of the world, which is the hottest areas of the world. And above it we've got the Tropic of Cancer, another imaginary line, and below it the Tropic of Capricorn, another imaginary line. And generally speaking, most of the stuff that we eat and drink is grown in between those two lines. So they are also the poorest countries in the world, generally speaking, as well. So if you think about it, most of the stuff that we absolutely rely on comes from these countries. Let's have a little bit of a look at a substance that you and I are all very familiar with, chocolate. Now, chocolate comes from cocoa, and in particular, cocoa is grown in West Africa, and there are 5.5 million smallholder farmers in West Africa. And this is the other interesting bit for the kids that are watching this. 1.8 million children actually work around the world to provide us with our chocolate. They work gathering the cocoa beans. It's incredible to think that, whilst you're at school or at home watching this, there are 1.8 million kids working in cocoa. Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire show actually grow 60% of the world's cocoa. So these two countries in West Africa actually grow 60% of all of the cocoa, and that's 5.5 million smallholders in those countries whose entire lives rely on chocolate and on us eating chocolate. So there's your excuse to eat chocolate. People rely on it. Here's a little picture of what the cocoa tree looks like, and here are some cocoa pods. Now, I said I'd tell you about the supply chain. The supply chain is basically a way of making sure that the stuff like the cocoa is processed into chocolate and then it comes to us. And supply chains for different things that you eat and drink and you buy and you play with can be very short, or they can be extremely long. Now, here's a little example, and I won't talk about the entire component of each bit of the supply chain, but just have a look at that. There's lorries, there's factories, it goes on an aeroplane, it goes on a boat. All around the world, cocoa is brought to different ports, to different factories. It begins obviously being grown, but you can see how that little wheel of the supply chain is actually quite complicated for cocoa, and for other products it's even more complicated. Now, the thing to remember as well, at every point in this supply chain, somebody wants to get paid because they've worked to bring the cocoa, to turn it into the chocolate, to add the other ingredients like milk and butter, to bring it to your supermarket and to your house. So everybody wants to get paid. And the interesting thing is, the person that gets paid the least is the one that you might think gets paid the most, the farmer. The farmer who grows the stuff that we rely on gets paid the least. And they also have a lot of problems to deal with. It's kind of quite hard to get your head around how many problems these world poorest smallholder farmers have. Now, the first one is they have no power. They have absolutely no power. We have consumer power. We can decide, do I want that chocolate or do I want that one? Do I want that toy or do I want that? Do I want that particular electronic device or do I want that one? They have got no power within this supply chain. They've got no power, first of all, over what they're paid for their crop. They can't argue. They have no power. They are just paid whatever the person who's buying it off them tells them. They've got no power over climate change, and all of you will be familiar with what's happening with our environment. So when there are droughts, when there are floods, when there are locust attacks, as you can see in the picture on here, they've just got no power over that. They've also got no power over what they're learning about farming, because every time the environment changes, they have to learn new processes and they have to find about new crops and stuff that's disease resistant, and they've also got no power over the cheats. And there are people who cheat them all the time. For example, when they go to weigh their coffee cherries, they're called coffee cherries, or they go to weigh their cocoa beans, somebody might mess around with the scales. So they're saying that actually there's more coffee cherries there than there actually is, so I've got to pay you this much, and the farmer really thought that there was more. So they're really lacking power in all of this. There's a picture of a drought. There's some wonderful, gorgeous looking coffee cherries that will eventually become the coffee that we drink. But the other huge thing is, even without all of this trade problem, before that, they're already lacking clean water. They're lacking health clinics, they're lacking medicines, because medicines cost money. You know, we're so lucky to have the NHS in this country, but in the most desperately poor countries, it isn't free in most countries. They also lack schools for children, and they lack a shop to go to. They don't have the big supermarket with everything that we have at the end of the road. And there's a lovely picture of some kids who just really just want some clean water. So because of all these problems for the producers, when I was growing up, a wonderful idea was created, and this is an idea that would stop exactly what is happening in this picture here. So there's an example of a cup of coffee. Your parents might go out and buy a cup of coffee for £3 or £4 from a cafe or from a takeaway, and if you look down right at the bottom, it says 3p or 30p, so that's 1 to 3%. That amount is the amount that a farmer would be paid for the coffee. So coffee might cost you £4, the farmer might get 3p for it. That's how bad the situation is with something like coffee, which is so popular. So Fairtrade was created, this idea called Fairtrade, or ethical trade as we also called it, and If you want to become a fair trade farmer, you decide to form a group with other farmers, and then you will get paid a good price for your crop. And the promise of fair trade, or of another ethical trade system, is whatever happens, when time gets hard, when the world's economy is crashing, you will still get paid a good amount for whatever it is. You will not be at the mercy of people saying, well, we can't pay you that amount now. Just imagine this. Every week you agree with your mum that you wash the car, and every week she pays you £5. And then one week, I mean, it's hard work washing a car, it tires me out. One week she says to you, well, there's your 50p. And you say, hang on, mum, that's worth £5. My work there was worth £5. And she'll say, well, times are hard, I can only pay you 50p. That's pretty bad, isn't it? This is the situation that farmers who desperately need this money so they won't starve are faced with until we had a system called fair trade. And also with fair trade, they get paid the good price, but they're also given as part of that price something called a premium. And it's a bit like some money you put to one side in a money pot. And then they can vote as a community to decide, what do we want with this special bit of savings that we've got? Do we want to dig some new wells with clean water? Do we want to build a health clinic or a school or a shop? So here are some examples of fair trade systems or fair trade badges. You might see these badges on different products. There's the very famous one in England, which is the fair trade logo, the fair trade badge. We've got other ones here, some examples. The Rainforest Alliance, and they concentrate particularly on helping farmers with their environment. So farmers who are really struggling with drought and disease problems, they might say, well, we want to go with the Rainforest Alliance because our issues are more about the environment at the moment. But it's down to the farmers to decide which system they go with. Now, here are some examples of people that I work with in Ethiopia, in Kenya and Tanzania. This is with a charity that I'm involved with, and we have just been so happy to make these guys have a lot better life. And what we do is we teach them about fair trade, we teach them about ethical trade, and we give them business information, and we do it all over the radio. So it's great because radio is massive in Africa, as you can imagine. There isn't access to the internet in the same way or to the TV. So the farmers can learn about fair trade over the radio waves. Over to you. Now, some of you might be sitting there thinking, well, what can I do? You know, I only get a few pounds of pocket money. You know, I don't go to the shops. My mum would never say, go to the shops and buy everything. What can you do? There's a lot you can do. And one of the things that kids have is pester power. You'll all have heard about pester power. When you want your parents to buy something, you nag, don't you? My kids do it. But what you can do is help fair trade through your pester power. Look in your parents' cupboards. Don't eat everything because we get very cross when that happens. Look in your parents' cupboards and look at what they've got. Have a look at the different products and have a look at the badges that you might see on them, and then you can maybe look them up on the internet. You can see there the Fair Trade badge, the Rainforest Alliance badge, different examples, and you will find some products that have got nothing and other products that seem to have quite a few. You can make sure that your parents or you, when you've got some money, can buy things that are fairly traded by finding out about the badges, by finding out about which products have which badges and looking into them. You know, you'll all be great on Google. You can investigate which of these products are fair or are ethical or not. Another thing that you can do, and which is really important, is to support local producers. So when we're talking about producers and small farmers, we don't always mean producers overseas. Farmers in this country, especially the smaller ones in our local areas, and producers who maybe make things like cakes and bread and who produce meat and cheese and milk, they also need help. So you are fair trading if you help local producers as well. Find out more. The internet is there. You know, you can find out so much more than what I've told you today if you're interested in this issue. And another thing that I would say as well is try and buy less stuff. Try and have less stuff, because the more you just buy stuff that you never play with, that you never wear, we all do it, the harder it is for people overseas who are poor, because their prices get driven down. The more we have, the more that we drive their price down. So just think about maybe consuming less, and it will help the environment as well. And another thing you can do is go and look up all the fair trade products. My kids were quite amazed that there's actually a fair trade football. So it's not just about bananas and rice and chocolate and coffee and tea and the stuff that we maybe instantly think of as grown-ups. There are so many toys and clothes out there now that use materials like cotton. So go and find out about it. And the Fairtrade organisation is particularly good at listing all of the products that you can now find if you're interested in that. So finally, if you've enjoyed this talk and if you're thinking, wow, I never realised what the issues were in the world, why not think about working in your family or in your school and become a bit of an expert on ethical trade? I never ever would have dreamt that I would know about this growing up, but as it happened, I actually went to live in Africa, and I went to see many years of people who just struggled with nothing, and they had no information and nobody ever took the time to help them. And you can actually do that, not just by buying things, but actually becoming a bit of an expert on it yourself. Just like this picture here, these young people are from Huddersfield, and they decided that they were going to become entrepreneurs, but ethical entrepreneurs. So they decided to create their own Fairtrade products. They even created their own Fairtrade tea and coffee. Some of the other young people I've worked with have created fudge and chocolate bars. So it can be done. You've just got to try and think outside the box a little bit and have some fantastic wild and wacky dreams. Build your own Fairtrade superpower, and by doing that, you will challenge this problem that we have with the inequality of where the power is and where the money is. And you can not only change your own life, but you'll also be really transforming other people's lives. Thank you very much, and I wish you a wonderful Fairtrade fortnight. Take care.